It's always exciting to get back to basics with a car that's small and relatively affordable, and that's exactly what I'm doing with the cheap and cheerful Proton Iriz 1.6 CVT. It is no secret that in the years to come, we'll be seeing more Geely-derived models like the X70 in Proton showrooms. But in 2019, Proton basically updated most of its existing models like the Iriz to kind of close the gap between its older cars and the ones to come. The Iriz, for one, has benefited from 367 new components, starting with the headlights. Now, they are not entirely new. They actually come from the Persona in kind of like a cost-cutting / facelift kind of move, which I wasn't particularly fond of at first because I thought the Iriz already looked good from the start, but it does gel well with the grille that Proton designed specifically for the Iriz to give it a character of its own. If we go to the sides, you will see that it gets a new set of alloys. Not the most exciting rims you'll see, but very polished look, and if you look closely, I believe those probably are the first set of lug nut covers you'll find in this price range. I know a lot of you like to paint your roofs black, but if you like to do that and if you go for the premium variant of the Iriz, you'll save money at your local paint shop because Proton has already done it for you at the factory. Moving to the back, the biggest change here is probably this black glossy panel which deletes the Proton logo in favor of Proton lettering instead. Again, similar theme to the X70, and you get a much sportier bumper, which I really believe elevates the look and feel, at least for the exterior of the Proton Iriz. It really does feel like a more polished product than the pre-facelift model. Inside, Proton has redecorated very well, starting with the black headliner and these nice semi-leather seats which really gave the cabin a more upmarket feel. There's also a new instrument cluster with a color screen wedged between the two dials. It does feel very premium, and more importantly, it's very clear, very easy to read. I'm not a fan of everything inside though. For example, this rear view mirror which Proton calls frameless. Technically there is a frame, it just happens to be see-through. And then you have the infotainment. It's actually quite a good infotainment to use, but the screen just reflects too much light under harsh sunlight like this, which can be very frustrating at times. It's hard to be in here without drawing comparisons to two of the Iris's most natural competitors. You have the Myvi, which easily offers more space for about the same money, and you have the Picanto, which costs more but gives you a more refined package in return for the price. But the Proton has a unique party trick that neither one of them has, which is what I'm going to show you right now. Hi Proton.
Follow you.
What's the time now?
It is 12:55.
Hi Proton.
What's up?
I want to go home.
Okay, let's go home.
Now that the map's set, let's go for a drive. Now, one of the biggest talking points with the Proton Iriz is the use of a CVT. And the concern is very justified because in the pre-facelift, the transmission was out of its depth most of the time. It was unrefined, it was noisy. But Proton deserves some praise for refining the transmission pretty well in the new car. Now it feels smooth and quiet for the most part. More importantly, when you do give the throttle a stab, it really responds. There is a tiny little bit of hesitance right at the start, but then it goes, I dare say almost like a mildly turbocharged car, even though it's naturally aspirated. But let's remind ourselves that in this segment, for about 50,000 ringgit, the 1.6 litre engine that the Iriz shares with the Persona does offer you the most power in its segment. And it shows on the straights. It's really a lot perkier than you think it is. In terms of handling, the steering is pretty old school in quite an entertaining way. It's very traditional in the sense that the steering feels its heaviest when the car isn't moving very fast. This can be a potential problem for some people when in car parks or in traffic. It may not feel as light as some other city cars, but it only lightens up on the move when it picks up speed, during which it gives the car this very playful edge, almost like a hot hatch, which really makes it very, very fun to drive. despite the snappy hatchback dynamics, it does feel pretty comfortable overall. I mean, you probably get a little bit more comfort and probably some more space for the guys in the back in the Persona, but yeah, in the Iriz it's actually not bad. And one thing that's certain is that the car is actually pretty quiet. Noise insulation is superb. You realize that really going into traffic and noticing that you really can't hear the motorbikes that's passing right beside you. So yeah, 5 stars for NVH for this car at this price point. Proton has really made it pretty refined. Keep your car on the throttle and the car will happily oblige. Of course, once you hit highway speeds, then you can't escape the drone that people typically associate CVTs with. And that goes back to how quiet the car is. So when there's noise coming from the engine bay, that's all you will hear. But for the most part, this car handles high speed with really an incredible amount of calmness and composure for a car of this size. So yeah, overall, I am actually pretty impressed with how the Iriz drives. I wouldn't say it comes as much of a surprise because driving dynamics has long been one of Proton's strongest suits. But don't take my word for it. Let's see what a couple of other hatchback owners have to say.
Okay, let me test the car. Okay, I wanna raise a bit.
Oh, turning radius is quite good, huh?
Whoa. I think the brake need to be improved.
It's a bit soft when you press on it, but it bikes.
For CVT 1.6, actually quite powerful.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing I hate about CVTs is that it doesn't change gear.
One thing that similar like X70 is this high Proton.
Follow you.
Cancel.
Okay, exit.
I think that's damn cool actually.
Yes. For me, this Iriz is bigger than my car. The boot space.
Oh yeah, the boot space is actually quite big.
Yeah.
Quite big for this size. Like you compare it beside a Myvi, you will see a Myvi is a bit longer, but the boot size is actually quite big for this size. But overall is, I would say,
Not bad.
not bad.
While we're comparing the Iriz against things like the Myvi, you might expect the 1.6 litre engine and the CVT to be a little bit more expensive to maintain. But in truth, if you actually look at the official maintenance figures for both cars, the Iriz is actually about 100 ringgit cheaper to maintain over 5 years or about 100,000 km. Spec to spec, it is also about 5,000 ringgit cheaper to buy. And when you consider the price, a cheaper car does give you lower installments and potentially lower insurance premiums as well. So the value proposition is actually pretty strong in the Iriz's favor. At the end of the day, the Iriz is a car with quite a number of quirks, but it embraces the quirks very well. In fact, it's one of the things that makes it quite unique. And it's also pretty good to drive, all things considered. I had quite a lot of fun in the driver's seat. Coupled with the features that Proton has added to this facelift, I think Proton has done a splendid job in ensuring that the compact hatch segment is a lot more competitive than it used to be.